Hi guys, well today we are going to be taking a look at a new addition to the Corsair Carbide series. So this here is the 600Q. Now Corsair released both the 600C and the 600Q this week. The idea being with the C that it kind of follows a pathway of style with a perspex window, while the Q kind of takes on a silent approach with closed off panels and other attributes which are associated with silence. Fundamental to 600Q is its rather unconventional internal design, which sees the motherboard tray inversed. So all of the core components are on the alternate side and the board is upside down, causing the CPU cooler to be placed at the very bottom and then the graphics card at the top. Now in terms of the pricing for 600Q, you're looking at around £120 in the UK and then upwards of $150 in America. That's quite a significant amount for such a case, but hopefully as we kind of progress through our video, it will become apparent whether 600Q is worth the asking price. So with that introduction now out of the way, let's begin our review of the 600Q. Right guys, well we're going to start at the front of 600Q. So here we've got this plastic fascia which has this semi-sheen finish. Now this panel is closed off as you can clearly see, but there are some gaps running down either side to bring in some air for the cooling. Now certainly from the outside of 600Q the inverted design isn't immediately apparent, but what is clear is that this case is considerably wider than the usual tower design. In the upper region on this front side there is a door there which hinges from the left, and this conceals two 5 1/4 drive bays. Now those covers are removable from the inside, and that door, just like many other areas of this case, has the noise damping material which will help to deaden any noise, any sound coming from within. Now with a bit of persuasion this front panel does lift off, and once it is attached there you can see the noise damping material, and attached to the chassis there we've got a dust filter. This unclips to reveal a pre-installed 140mm cooling fan, which is actually an AF140L. Now at the front we can install another 140mm fan, and although it isn't installed, one does come separately packaged, so it's probably a worthwhile thing dropping it in below that fan that is already installed if your intention is to maximise the airflow and performance. The other thing to mention is that since we have the mounting holes for two 120 and 140mm fans at the front there, this paves the way for 240 and 280mm radiator support, and we're going to have a look at this a little later. Up at the very top of 600Q we have the front panel connectivity, and this sits on a black reflective strip, and this provides us with quite a few options. So we have a reset button, two USB 2 ports, two USB 3 ports, headphone and a microphone jack, a 3-speed and a 3-channel fan controller, activity LEDs, and a power button. So it's nice there we've got the ability to regulate the speed of those cooling fans within 600Q, and this will ultimately give you the option to either choose low noise or performance. And later in the review we're going to have a look at the 3 different speeds and do an audio test. Further back from these ports, the top section is completely closed off as you can see, so this alludes to the top of 600Q having no support for mounting any cooling devices since there is no perforated mesh. Now since 600Q is really designed for silence, both of the side panels are completely closed off and they contain no standout features such as your mounting placements, ventilation, or a window. The window is actually available on the 600C, which is pretty much identical to the 600Q, the Q having all of those silent features. So both side panels have the 2 thumb screws for fixture, so I'm going to take these side panels off. And you can see on the inside there a layer of noise reduction material, and the panels have quite a weighty feel to them and are certainly good quality. So we now have a view inside 600Q, and that inverted motherboard tray should be pretty obvious. So the tray is on the alternate side, and it's also reversed with the CPU and the memory being close to that lower section and the graphics card being at the top. And the inside is pretty interesting. You know, we've got some decent routes for cable management, lots of grommets and hooks, as well as the tool-free mechanisms for things like storage. Now the power supply sits in the top section of 600Q and is positioned towards the back, and underneath there are some anti-vibration pads to give that unit a soft cushion. Now usually the power supply does draw in air from the outside of the case, but since the top is closed off and the edge of that power supply is kind of pushed up against the top, there is only one choice: to have that fan facing the rest of the system. And though it's doubtful any problems will occur, this means that the power supply is probably going to pull in some heat from the system below. Directly opposite the power we have those 2 optical drive bays, and these have the tool-free mechanisms for getting such devices in and out of the case. And if you aren't planning to use such a drive, this is a good area for storing any redundant or unwanted cables. Just below the power supply, we have two dedicated areas for storage, and these include the common hard drive trays. And these trays can house 2.5 inch or 3.5 inch drives, and they're completely toolless, so the drive simply drops into the tray. And further down, we also have a trio of SSD docks, which will certainly come in handy for the vast majority of you who are perhaps now moving everything over to solid state. And to install an SSD, all you've got to do is slide the drive in. Alternatively, you can also detach the dock if you prefer to attach some screws for better fitment. Onto the prominent side, we have a series of 8 PCI expansion covers. Each of those have the ventilation cutouts and the respective thumb screw. And below the covers there is an empty space for the rear I/O and then another AF140L, and this one is positioned as an exhaust. And being in the position that it is, the CPU cooler is going to be in direct alignment with the fan for the best possible airflow. At the opposite end, the front of 600Q, we have that front AF140L intake fan, and again the mounting calls for another fan, be that a 120 or a 140mm. Now, since the power supply is at the top of the chassis, there is plenty of space along the bottom of 600Q for installing additional cooling or indeed water cooling radiators. So in this area we can house a trio of 120mm fans or two 140mm fans. So if you're perhaps using a closed loop or you want to add in a radiator, you can, because there are mounting holes there for 240, 280 and 360mm radiators, and we're going to have a look at this in a moment. Okay, so next we're going to take a closer look at the clearance options within 600Q, as this is quite an important factor for you system builders out there who perhaps need to know whether something will fit or not. So for the CPU cooler, we have a massive 200mm of space for the height of the heatsink, and so this means that big flagship offerings are going to be fully supported. So for reference there, we're using the Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo, which is just 159mm in height. In the graphics card department, there are no obstructions from any hard drive or optical cages, so this is great news as it means that multi-GPU configurations aren't affected. So we have up to around 370mm of space here. That is plenty of space for high-end kit. Now the location behind the motherboard tray is an important one for storing any cables. So 600Q has around 20mm between the back of the tray and the side panel. That is quite a generous amount of clearance, and it should help to create decent cable management. Okay, now 600Q can accommodate radiators at the front of the case. We have the option to install a 240 or a 280mm radiator. So here you can see that we've got the Hydro Series H100i GTX at the front here, and that is a 240mm radiator. But we also have the mounting holes and the space for a 280mm. And at the bottom of 600Q there is an assortment of different mounting holes so that you can install a 240, a 280 or a 360mm radiator. Sadly, our Phobia G-Charger 360, which is quite a gigantic radiator, that is the thicker type, does not fit inside this case. So if you've got a slimmer type and it is 360, then you've got a better chance of getting it in here. So if you have something like a Hydro Series dual fan configuration, a closed loop, just like this one here, this is again the H100i GTX. That is going to fit inside there, and so it's quite a flexible chassis in regards to water. And by the way, just for reference, from the bottom of the case up to the motherboard, there is approximately 5cm. Right guys, well for our final clip, we're just going to do a quick sound demo to give you guys a bit of an idea of how loud 600Q is. So we're going to use the fan controller here. We've got the fans all hooked up to that fan controller, and we're going to switch to each different mode to give you a bit of a bit of a scope, a bit of a range of the different sound levels. You should be able to pick up how loud that is. And we've actually already installed the additional AF140L at the very front of 600Q. So that gives us a total of 3 140mm cooling fans inside 600Q. So we'll go ahead, we've got the first setting, hit power. Up to the medium or mid. And then up to the third setting, which is high. So that completes our look at the new 600Q. So this is definitely something which is quite distinct and it's almost quirky, but that is of course only when you go inside the case. From the outside you could be quite easily deceived, as this case doesn't really give away much. For those of you who do like that super sleek type of refined look, then you're going to like this case, especially since the finish on it is quite different from other cases. It's kind of smooth, but it does have that bit of a shine to it. It doesn't pick up marks too easily compared to some cases. But inside, everything is really well mapped out. It's a fun design. All of the components inside there fit really well, as we've seen in the video. And the things that I really like is the fact you get that fan control, combine that with the silent features, the material on all those outward facing panels and the optional fan. Then you've got all the ingredients really for low noise, but also the ability to be able to amp up the cooling. There are a few areas though to watch out for. With this case, the CPU power cable has a long distance to travel. You might need an extender. Ours literally just about fit, but it was kind of stretched. And also the fan mounts at the very front there are a little bit flimsy. They do flex and they do bend. But aside from that, this case really does come highly recommended by us, and it's been really fun to take a look at. The full review is going to be on the screen and in the description, guys. Over there we've got the cooling performance. So thanks very much for taking the time out to watch today's video. If you did like it, then please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please hit that button, and I'll see you guys in the next video.